This is the Ops Game Changers podcast, where we share real-life stories from remarkable leaders that are transforming the world of service operations in financial services, healthcare, and BPOs. In this series, we explore some of the key challenges faced by service operations as they strive to deliver more capacity, more productivity, and more business impact. In each episode, we delve into how these Ops Game Changers have addressed a key challenge or issue. Our guests share how they went about unlocking significant value, adopting best practices, and experiencing some game-changing results.
Hello and welcome to Ops Game Changers, the podcast that shines a light on the crucial role that operations teams have in driving business performance and improving staff and customer experience. My name is Bhavesh. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at ActiveOps, and I'll be your host. Now, in each episode, I hone in on one challenge that a business has solved. I delve into how they went about doing it and explore the outcomes achieved. Now, today we're joined by Dan O'Neill, an experienced banking Chief Operating Officer. Dan has spent over 2 decades transforming operations across some of the world's leading financial institutions, both in the UK and Australia. Now, in that time, Dan has developed a leadership philosophy that challenges how we all think about operations and what it really means and how we need to evolve to drive successful outcomes. Now, before we jump into the topic, let's welcome Dan to the podcast. Well, thanks for joining us, Dan.
Well, great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to catch up with you.
So, Dan, before we jump into the topic at hand, you're an experienced COO in banking. How did you get there? What's your journey been like to get to being a COO?
Well, I actually came from technology. So when I first started out back in London, and I won't say how many years ago it was, I was actually doing desktop support for different trading floors in different banks and moving around. And one of the things that you learn on a trading floor, particularly with the bankers back in those days, you find that the solution isn't just in front of you. You know, the solution or the issue isn't the desktop in front of them or the app they're using. You really have to understand what's going on behind it. You have to understand where the data is coming from. You understand how systems work. And that gets you into sort of end-to-end thinking, gets you into talking to different teams, gets you to understanding how technology works, everything from the desktop to the applications, to the networks, to the mainframes and systems and so on. And that really intrigued me. That really got me interested about identifying problems and solving problems. And then when I moved down to Australia, which is 2005, I had the opportunity to move into banking operations away from technology. And many people might say the same thing now, but I knew nothing about banking operations then. You know, what the hell is this process thing? But what intrigued me immediately was when I started asking about, you know, why I think things taking so long, you know, where's information coming from, very few people actually understood the flow.
And did you find back then, in the late 2000s, when you were in operations, I get the sense technology wasn't as adopted back then in operations. Is that a fair assumption?
Oh, it probably wasn't as invested in as it was. I mean, you still argued now, everyone says, oh, it's digital and I've digitized the end-to-end. You go into many organizations and they've just digitized the front end and rarely the full end-to-end. So there was technology in operations, but it wasn't true, you know, what I would call sophisticated technology. Very few workflows were around at the time. Automation was there in bits and pieces. So yeah, it was a bit frustrating, particularly as a technologist, where I would sit down, and I love sitting down with colleagues and understanding what they're doing. And as a technologist, actually can't be embarrassed about, I can't believe you're still using systems that way. It's like if you were using Excel when it first came out, and a lot of people will still probably use Excel when it first came out to when it is today, even though the features and functions have improved dramatically, because no one's taught them how to do it, no one's shown them how to do it, no one's really truly understood what they were trying to do and show them how the new system can fix it. And it's the same thing in many organizations. They're plunked down with some technology, they get a couple of hours training maybe, but they don't really understand how they can fully utilize the technology that's available to them. And so, yeah, sitting down with people and understanding how they work from a technology point of view, I could see where the opportunities were.
Wow. I mean, I was actually at a customer just last week, and they were talking about their before picture being very much Excel-based. And that wasn't that many years ago, so it's still heavily used in terms of that technology.
Yeah.
So when you think about operations moving forward, I mean, if you think about the next 3 to 5 years, I mean, we've seen a huge technology advancements in those 15, 20 years, right?
Yeah.
But it seems to be accelerating really fast, particularly with AI coming down the track, or it's probably already here if we think about it that way. So when you're now a COO thinking about setting up operations for what is the future, how does that change your thinking from when you started to now?
It's just another new tool. Mm-hmm. If I oversimplify it, it is an amazing tool. I use AI every single day in the work that I do, or how I just use my own personal life. And I think it can fast forward a lot of the things that we've always wanted, but technology just wasn't there. So AI gives us that significant step forward, particularly in things like knowledge management. Some of it will be hard problem solving, correlation of data, understanding where the information or the issues actually are. But it is another tool. So it won't solve everything. You still need to fundamentally understand what your business is. You still need to fundamentally understand what your experiences are, what your customers want. If you don't understand the fundamentals of your business,
you have the same problem.
Yeah, you have exactly the same problem. You just got another tool that just gets thrown in. You know, when computers first came out, it was a step change, and people said, "Oh, you know, we're going to lose our jobs." And then it was automation. The problem then with automation is that everyone started using it, but not in a standard way. And then you have this proliferation of automation out everywhere, right? End user computing is one of the pain points for many financial institutions currently. AI has a danger of doing the same thing. So you really need to put some really strong governance and standards around it if you want to take advantage of it sustainably going forward. But it's early days, and I think that's where the biggest danger is, that people are fast forwarding, trying to utilize AI, but not in a standard way in an organization.
So you end up with the same problem as you just described.
It will be multiple versions of different AI models, or not knowing where the AI models actually are, not knowing how they're governed, not knowing how they're changed. Yeah. And all that to me spells is remediation in the future.
And when you're thinking about as a COO, what kind of stuff now keeps you awake at night? What do you worry about these days?
I worry about the stuff I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So where there's known problems, then you can come up with known solutions. It's the unknown. So as an operations leader, I always worry about the queue that's not being monitored. I worry about the change that hasn't been fully understood. Because those are the things that aren't in your control. Once they're in your control, you can actually do something about it. So it's giving yourself the comfort, and also the executive team and the board, the comfort that actually we know what's going on in the most important parts of our business.
You know, when you think about, I guess that kind of good segue to the topic for today, right? So you talk about operations with a little o, and you know, I guess we should unpack that a little bit and kind of understand what you mean by that. But I assume it's a philosophy that you've built up over time in your roles as being COO and in operations for these last 15, 20 years. So what do you mean by operations with a little o? What's that all about?
Yeah, it's just when in an organization we divide ourselves. You know, we put a structure in place and we say, you know, front office, sales, product, operations with a capital O. And then we get given these directions from different parties, whether it's be board or exco or even the regulator, saying you now must improve performance. And off we go in our little divisions and saying, how do we improve things? And we have different standards, different metrics, different way of talking, different interactions. And when a problem occurs, the company is brilliant that comes together and we fix the problem, but then it disappears back into divisions as a normal day-to-day practice. So what I mean by little o is the business is operations. So how does from a customer need to customer outcome, how does the work flow? What are the things that are most important to us that we must work together on and understand every single day that flow through all those divisions? That's what operations actually is. So when people say, oh, you've got to improve the performance of operations, I ask the question, are you talking about the capital O or are you talking about the small o? Because if all you're doing is talking about the capital O, you're looking in the wrong place.
Because in a siloed component.
Yeah, it's a silo thinking immediately. And, you know, my experience in operations is, you know, work flows in and work flows out. And I'm not saying there's always opportunities in operations. Of course there are. But at the end of the day, a customer typically comes into other parts of the division, whether it's online or whether it's an app or whether it's a front line, whatever it may be. And so you have to understand the need from the beginning and how do you improve that and make sure you're giving the best service all the way through rather than just when it happens to hit a certain division.
Do you think part of the problem is the word operations?
Oh, it could be, but the language is a thing, right? And I could change it and come up with some other wonderful name. But at the end of the day, someone else will still call it operations. So I don't think the naming of it is the problem. It's the way how we structure and how we report still, right? So, if you look at the reporting that typically comes out in an organization, you get your financial reports by division, you get your culture reports by division, you get your risk reports by division, and so on. So we force this thinking into an organization versus actually saying, well, where are the most important things from a customer perspective or a staff perspective? How does that flow through the organization? And how do we improve that? That's actually how the company works.
So, it's really interesting because you, at a certain level, you're talking about, customer experience targets and, employee experience and, risk and cost and all those elements at a more macro level. So those kind of KPIs exist, right? But I guess the challenge, what you're talking about, is you're just looking at an isolated component of it, and somebody sitting in operations doesn't think about the full end-to-end. Somebody sitting at the front is only focusing on their bit and not connecting the whole job together. So I'm fascinated by that. When you go into a boardroom and you're trying to explain to your C colleagues, your CFO, CEO, that, by the way, somebody needs to take ownership of this end-to-end, how does that conversation go down?
Yeah, you get wry smiles or laughter for some people, or people not looking you in the eye. And it's a serious conversation. And I would suggest, majority of the organizations I have, that's probably where the biggest challenge is, about who actually owns that process or experience end-to-end. And I think you have to think about things that way, because again, it just goes back to the facts that every value you create, every experience you provide, every need that you meet is through a process, through an experience. It's just the way of life. And so we fool ourselves if we think we're just going to solve it in the same way we've been trying to solve it for years and years and years by this divisional side or by projects. When I hear about a project going live or a project being initiated, and I'm going, okay, so what happens at the end of a project?
Well, you stopped, didn't you?
Then what? It goes live, everyone gives each other a high five, and then 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, you're looking about where are the benefits, where's the business case, has it really delivered? And all the people who are involved in it have gone or moved on or disappeared. And so how do you know things are being sustained and embedded? So you have to think about things differently. So the biggest challenge is who is the owner of the process? And that's where you have to spend most time. Actually, more importantly, what are the key processes that we really want to focus on? And then let's agree about who the ownership will be across that C-suite.
And do you get pushback from the C-suite, or is it almost like it's obvious, right? When you think about it, it's quite the logical thing to think about is your end-to-end journey.
Yeah.
People have been talking about end-to-end journeys for
long
years,
time.
right? It's not a new concept.
No.
So, you would think the successful organizations are probably doing it more joined up than others, potentially. How do you convince people at a C level to think about this? Because it's like a cultural shift. It's a mindset shift. It's a change, isn't it?
Cultural behavior shift, exactly that. But the problem is we're set up, as I said earlier, that way. The reporting that we do is still set up like a structure. So it's and I understand it and I get it from my own perspective. If someone came to me and said, oh, now you're going to own this, and I'm going, well, what do you mean? My KPIs aren't aligned to that. My reward system isn't aligned to that. So there are two key parts that you're going to have to start changing and thinking about. And then the reporting in itself, to truly understand from an end-to-end perspective, because currently to try and get that view, you literally have to pull it together manually. And that's a huge overhead. And then by the time you pull it together manually, it's out of date.
Anyway. Yes.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of blockers there. So this isn't like, okay, I've got an owner there for my problem is solved.
Yes.
You really have to get buy-in from an organization saying, yes, you know what, we do want to move towards customer experience or process experience view. And so what are the mechanisms that we need? What are the design mechanisms and standards that we need to move and transform ourselves towards that? And then demonstrate some quick wins and some ongoing sustainable wins that allows you to embed it.
So in your experience, in your journey that you've been on, was there a key example, a key moment that was the epiphany that said, hold on a second, we need to think about this differently, that's helped you in your journey and your experience as you move forward?
Yeah, I have seen where we've been very siloed in an organization. We have some major regulatory issues. The regulators come out and start saying you need to start thinking end to end. We demonstrate how we're thinking end to end. They say, great, about time you guys have got it. This is in the bank many, many, many years ago. And that bank transitioned itself to end-to-end thinking. And the moment I knew it was being embedded as an organization is when the CEO started talking about it at the sort of the executive team meetings, not his direct teams, not his indirect teams, but to a broader executive team across the organization. When the CRO started talking about end-to-end, this wasn't language that was there before. So when I hear the CEO or the CRO talking about end-to-end thinking and talking about process management, and I'm not the one saying it, then I know then we're getting there. It's part of the language now, therefore it's part of the mindset. And that organization's gone on from strength to strength with that type of thinking.
Was there a moment in that journey where, I don't know, two departments started to work closer together and there was one thing that, at the end of the day, you talked about quick wins and you've got to get people believing in the combined effort being bigger outcome, right? Was there a particular moment, a particular example that you thought about, yes, okay, now this is really going to work if we do this properly?
Yeah, there was. There was a particular product we had, which is the main selling product, home lending, in typical banking in Australia. I was leading operations for the bank. And you're giving typically every year some investment to make, and the push is automate everything straight through processing, and by the organisation hadn't gone down the end-to-end view. In fact, it was prior to me really becoming the chief process officer for an organisation, so it was still very siloed thinking. But as part of the exercise, we pulled together actually what was the true end-to-end view. And it was very difficult getting that because data standards were different, terminology was different. And so trying to understand actually what the process was, what the metrics were, took some time. But we got there by getting all the teams together. And we clearly demonstrated that automating certain tasks in operations, whilst it would improve some of the operations turnaround time, which is always good, it actually never improved the customer experience. Because the time we had it was only a small proportion of the time of the overall time. And so rather than, I said, automating what's in operations, because we'd all think we're brilliant because we've reduced turnaround time, there's some benefits in there as well. Why don't we invest it further up the value chain and dramatically change the customer experience and also improve the conversion rate, which proved to be right, and lower operational risks because the quality and completeness of data was improved. And we saw conversion jump by nearly 50%. We saw turnaround time dramatically shrink, particularly for decision time. And then it gave us a bit more scale. So we invested in the right place because we understood the end-to-end view versus only understanding the data we had to hand. So you need to go out and take a risk and work with their product teams and their frontline team and their data teams to actually collate and understand the data together and make the time to do it. I remember people telling me, oh, you're boiling the ocean down. I'm going, well, no, I'm just bringing islands of data together to make sure we actually understand what the hell we're supposed to be doing.
And I think that's really interesting because I guess the key is the data, isn't it, really? It's the visibility of having that data and connecting it up and then understanding it.
It is. Data is obviously a key point because you need to demonstrate the effectiveness and the benefits of it. But, I'll always say the most beneficial way of actually understanding what's really going on is going out there talking, listening and observing. When I say come out and have a look at an operations center, or when I go out to different branches or a front line or listen to call centers or see what's going on online or speak to customers more importantly, I want to see what they're doing and what they're feeling and how they're thinking. Because that actually tells you what's really going on. How frustrating is it, Or, oh, I know it's going to take long because that's just the way it is. And you go, well, really?
We should be doing it better, yeah.
Do you go down and sit down with your colleagues in an operations or a front line, and they're going through multiple screens just to do something really, really simple. I'm going, why are you cutting and pasting all this data around the place? And, you're not checking this, but I saw someone doing the same job and they were checking it. Do you understand that that's a control? And it's really important that quality of that and the completeness of that is key. but you're not doing, but someone else is. So you don't have a shared best practice. So it's those insights are more important.
Yeah, it's the human bits, right?
Well, it is, because you get lost. You get lost in a meeting room, and you get lost in a boardroom with data and presentations, because you only understand what you've been given. And sometimes you need to break that mold. And people say, yeah, it takes time to do that. And yes, it does take time, and it takes effort. But that's what we're here for.
So one of the things that you talk about is the impact processes.
High impact processes,
and, you know, I think you mentioned just a minute ago the idea of potentially one of the arguments is it's too big you're boiling the ocean, there's too much stuff. And I think you mentioned there's something like 15 to 20 high impact processes in a typical bank. So you're not actually trying to solve everything, you're just solving, 10, 20 processes and one at a time, I assume. So what does a high impact process mean to you, and how do you go about identifying it and creating it or constructing it?
Yeah, the best way of thinking about it is, what are the things or the processes or experiences that if they were to fail, they're going to cause the exec team or the board the biggest issues or discomfort. And so, to your point earlier, there are thousands of processes in an organization. And when people start looking at performance or efficiencies and so on, they think, oh, let's go out and map all the processes. That's actually not what the answer is. The answer is saying, okay, let's truly understand what are the things that are most important, what generates most revenue, what generates most cost, what generates most risk, where do our customers touch the most, and what do our staff touch the most. So high impact process is a combination of both customer and internal. So it could be anything from the expenses processes, onboarding a staff member process. When you join a new organization, how many times you hear going, oh, it's taking me ages to get my laptop or access to my system. Or when I came on board, things weren't available to me. And you'll have a breakdown there because someone's done the recruitment, and then you're onboarded, and then you get these different contracts, which are paper form, and then you're physically signing. And then someone then hands it off to someone in technology, and then they've got to order a laptop. Someone else orders a phone, and it all takes loads of different time. And so everyone's looking at metrics, and the metrics will be, oh yeah, we've hired people and we've recruited people, but they never look at, how many people did they interview and how many people actually were responded to. One of the biggest complaints when you're looking for a role is people don't get feedback, which impacts your brand. So there's so many different metrics just onboarding a staff member from an end-to-end perspective that I would say 99% of all organizations do not understand.
And when you join a bank, or when you've joined companies in the past, the onboarding process, do you just instantly know that there's some challenges here?
Yeah, you do. You get a feeling for it because you feel that you've been handed over from one to another, and it's unfair for me because I get guided to get through it.
Yes.
But I'm, so when I do go out and I speak to new recruits, that's the question I ask. So how was the onboarding experience? Right from the interview right through to the end. Because then you get a real flavor of how well is the organization connected. So that's just one. That's an internal one. Expenses, as I said, is another one that could be painful for people. But most people in an organization use expenses. So you're going to want to make it nice and smooth. And because the more time they spend on doing their expenses,
they're not doing the work.
They're not actually doing the work they're here for, right? Exactly. So you've got to make it so the real stuff that they should be doing on a day-to-day basis, they can do it without thinking. So they can spend most of that time thinking about how to improve stuff. That's the goal of any operations leader with a small o, I would suggest. And so other things then would be in an organization, what are the key products that you're selling? So, in a bank, it'll be home lending, commercial lending, payments, and so on. They're key processes that you have. So it's not just the external customer ones. It's also the internal ones as well. And, a good friend, Roger Tregear, will always say, managing a process is also a process itself.
Yes.
And so you need to be an expert in that as well.
So is that one of the ways you get buy-in from the C-suite and other parts of the organization, by getting them on the floor and seeing actually what's going on? Is that one of the ways, the kind of the key moments of, oh my God, this is what's going on? Yeah,
it's one of the tools of the trade. And I think it's one of the things that you just need to do. Unfortunately, I've been in many organizations where I say that to CEOs, and there's a resistance to it, because I would suggest some C-suite don't feel that they can go because they don't understand actually the work itself. Sometimes people don't want to understand the issues and challenges because they know they're going to have to do something about it once they see it. It goes back to my model I have of conscious thinking forces conscious decisioning. So I love to force people to consciously think about the end-to-end, understand what really is going on. So when you are making a decision about prioritization or funding or change, then
you're doing it with your eyes open.
You're doing it with your eyes open and understanding what the impact could be and whether that's the right prioritization. And I feel for the C-suite and I feel for the board, having come through the different layers in an organization. When you get there, you get given these papers with different terminology, different standards from different divisions, talking about a specific problem. You're going, okay, but how does this fit into the strategy? How do I know that if we were to do this, it actually improves and moves us forward? And so one of my roles as a COO and an operations leader in different organizations to try and to make that simple for people to make those decisions.
So I mean, just thinking about the COO role then, I mean, you've probably seen and you've changed the dimensions of what that looks like from a traditional COO to a COO today, because you are thinking about the overall end-to-end. And do you think the technology advancements of workflow, RPA, process analysis, process insights, all that stuff, almost forces people to think in that silo rather than thinking in a broader way, and then you end up with COOs who haven't got the right mindset to think about it in a different way. How do you make sure that if you're going to hire a COO, how do you make sure you got the right COO who's going to think about it in a slightly different way for you?
Yeah, well, the COO's got to think that way as well.
True.
Otherwise, they'll never identify the COO that they want.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point, we don't help ourselves still by allocating funding by divisions.
Yes.
Versus allocating funding by the things that we really need to protect and improve from a reputational, revenue, cost, risk perspective. So I think they're really hard to change. Don't get me wrong. I know I say this is really easy to do.
Well, it's not.
It's not. It is a major culture and behavioural change that you need. And your role, for me, is a change agent. As a COO, I think is a change agent is your key role. You've got to think about it that way across the organization. If you're labeled and saying you're a COO for operations, you're an operations leader.
Yes.
It's the chief operating officer, and we call it many different names across the industry. But at the end of the day, particularly if you're coming from an operations perspective and a technology perspective, and I'm lucky to have both in the armory, then you can only think systems and enterprise-wide.
And that's probably a difference, isn't it, in terms of your technology background? Probably lends itself to thinking slightly differently than maybe a traditional ops person who's come through the journey and become a COO.
It could, actually, yes. Because it forces you to have systems thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, and it forces you to be enterprise thinking. You can't isolate just where the problem is. You know there is upstream and downstream links. I used to make me laugh when we talk about BCP, and they go, "Here's our critical system." It might be a mainframe or back in my day, a data general thing. Show how old I am.
We're showing our age.
Yeah. Well, my first thing was MS-DOS 3.0. God, but they say, "Oh, the BCP is this critical system," and I used to ask, but that's just getting data from another system. And if that isn't a critical system as well, then how can this one box be isolated? If the other boxes and systems and network failed around it, then this thing wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And they go, "Oh, yeah, but if we have to make all those critical systems as well, then the cost and effort." And they're going, "Yeah, but it doesn't make sense if you just have one. It doesn't work that way." In the same way, I say, well, email is now a critical function. And he said, "Oh, no, that's just a communication thing." I said, "I'm telling you, if we have to go down and we can't access the email or we can't access our shared folders, if you're telling me they're not critical systems, then I don't know how you work, right?" So things have progressed and moved on, but you have to think enterprise-wide.
Yeah, I think that's But when you think enterprise-wide, right, one of the things that I find fascinating is, I mean, as long as I've been working with technology companies, working with customers in banking and other industries, things like transformation have been constantly ongoing, right? Organizations are constantly transforming. And in some ways, what you're describing is a big transformational changed for the organization and what they're thinking about. But yet most of these fail, right? We know the failure rate for transformational programs is really, really high.
Yeah.
I guess part of that perhaps is a little bit of the thinking then, in terms of how you measure the outcomes, the end-to-end. And is it because the transformations are still focused on silos of change? Is that one of the major reasons why perhaps they don't get the outcomes they need to be?
I think there's many different reasons. It could be anything from culture, behavior itself. I think one of the common ones that I see, it's because it becomes a project and people fixate therefore on milestones or an end date.
And then they finish and they move on.
Oh yeah, and but they also forget about what they're actually trying to improve. Right? I've seen many projects and the project managers who are brilliant and they're very disciplined. And they go, but we're delivering this. And I go, yeah, but the business on the line has changed and therefore it doesn't actually improve the business anymore. So we've got to fundamentally change it. And they go, no, but the project is going live here and this is what we need. I'm going, again, if you listen to what I'm saying, it's not improving the underlying business. And so the structure and governance of the project therefore was wrong because it's fixated on a date or it's fixated on a delivery versus fixated on what is it really trying to improve, what business is it improving, and how is it improving, and how is it embedding it. So, one thing I was taught very early on, if you're running an operations division, your role is to be able to run it and change it. And so a transformation program needs to be owned by someone. If it's fundamentally changing a key high-impact process, then the owner of that high-impact process needs to own the owner of the transformation. Yeah. And they'll be the ones who'll be held to account if it doesn't truly move you towards the target you're trying to move to.
And do you think the high impact processes, I mean, logically in my mind, the owners would be on the business side?
Yes.
Right? They would be the fundamental.
Has to be.
So HR
it's a business.
Whatever. It's a business driven thing. And I own the end to end of, I don't know, my mortgage business or whatever the business happens to be.
Exactly.
Which means that individual has to know how to work with all parts of the process, all departments to connect it up. And that's where the COO and the operations team, in its traditional sense, has a lot of input towards what that end-to-end looks like.
Yeah, and the best transformation programs I've seen is where they're owned by the process owner, whether home lending or commercial lending. There's many great examples around in the industry, and some of those people have gone on to be CEOs of other banks. And what they've done, they've owned it end to end. And as an operations leader, I work with them and we say, okay, what are the things that are really going to transform this organization, whether it's in my division or whether it's in risk or whether it's in the product or whether it's a technology solution, and they own it. And the key thing in the methodology I roll out as part of high impact process is that owner sits with the end-to-end value chain and understands the performance of that each month at a minimum with the decision makers. Yep. So projects can feed into it and saying, here's a project and this is what we're doing, this is what's going live. The process owner understands the current metrics, they understand what the target metrics are, and as well as running the business and seeing what's going on in business as usual, which is constant change as well, the project is feeding into it, and it can manipulate or direct the project where it needs to if things need to change.
So it's more fluid in that sense.
Yeah, and that's how you run your business.
Yes.
So I get there's the structural team stuff that people still need to do, and the force that we have about managing costs and budgets and so on. Yeah. But if you don't have that regular, and I would suggest it's minimum once a month, we have the decision maker across the end-to-end flow who are understanding what's going on with that flow. First of all, you won't get sustained performance. And second of all, you won't find the problem before it creates itself. Because if you're looking at the trends, you're looking at customer trends, staff trend, risk trend, near misses, costs and so on, you can spot things easier and earlier if you're looking at it on a month-by-month basis, because you're not just waiting for the problem to occur and then get together and then disappear again. You're actually saying, no, this is a common gathering we have and conversation we have, and then you'll get to know the process better. You'll get to know where the different trends are. You won't react to things that are just going wrong because you go, oh no, that's normal. That's a seasonality thing. That's okay. You'll get to be better at forecasting, and you have much better conversations like this. It's not just about the reports that you send out. It's about the conversations you're having across the flow and saying, where do we really need to prioritize ourselves?
So in the paper, you talk about the 7 pieces of advice that you give in terms of 7 ideas that you should think about. One of them being this idea of flipping from transformational delivery to absorptive capacity. Can you unpack that a little bit? What does that mean? What's your thinking around that?
Yeah, so it's basically just what I was just saying is about how you manage the flow on a constant basis. So, typically a problem occurs, we'll all get together, and then we fix the problem, and then off we go in our separate ways. Or if you're talking about a flow, people have conversations one-to-one with different parts of the value chain and try and understand that, and is everything going okay, and so on and so forth. But again, they're isolated conversations. So running your business is about that end-to-end side. My personal view, this is hard to do, and I'll admit I haven't got this perfected yet. But when you are having multiple projects and changes, my view is you don't have multiple steer COOs. So those projects and changes flow up into that end-to-end process owner. Because at the end of the day, it's their business. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they should know what their current metrics are and what their target metrics are in the next 3 to 5 years. And so anyone making a change or doing anything in that flow, then if they can't convince the owner and demonstrate with evidence that they are moving them towards their metrics of the future, then they shouldn't be doing it. They shouldn't be investing. They shouldn't be making the change. And that, to me, is what adaptive management is all about.
So do you think then, a couple of thoughts in my mind as you've been describing that. One is the business owner. Do they have the skill set to think about this on an end-to-end perspective? But also, actually, they may be forced to think about it that way with the adoption of, let's say AI agents, right? It's fundamentally what you're describing there is understanding all of those elements that give you your end-to-end journey, right? And so therefore, the business owner has to have there's probably a learning curve for them in terms of getting to this thinking, but also the next 3 to 5 years of how that's going to accelerate very, very quickly.
Yeah, it does. It's a different skill, different capability. It is a completely different mindset. And we haven't been trained or educated that way. We've been forced to think from a divisional point of view. We get it every now and again. We think about it when we get the opportunity to, but then we go back to our silos because that's just the way the system sort of works. So I do think it's one of those environments where we have to give people maybe a choice of words, give people that environment to be able to grow and think that way. But also set up a structure and governance that actually forces people to think that way as well. Yeah. And it is a hard mechanism and muscle that you've got to grow, and no one gets it perfectly from day one. And a lot of people, some of the best people I've seen who do this go, that's quite difficult, but they don't report to me. I haven't got full control over it. Yeah. It sounds like I'm doing more work. That's not in my KPI. And I go, yeah, but just give it a go. Right? Just get these people once a month, have a conversation. It's not about getting loads of reports together. Just start talking about what's your biggest problem, where's the biggest issue, and how do we together as a value chain prioritize what needs to be prioritized, and start having that conversation. What you find is, and what I found with the best people who've implemented it going, oh my God, yeah, I get it now. I actually understand where I need to be fixated on. Yeah. I now actually understand it. And to me, the best way of when I see a really good result is particularly in the banking world, where the regulators come in and the first thing they're going to ask is, so explain to me the end-to-end process, explain to me the end-to-end risk and controls you have, explain to me what you're doing about it. And the owner, with confidence and with evidence, can just talk about it. Yeah. I've been in organizations before where they know the regulators coming in, they panic for 6 months and put all these maps together and these documentation together and these experts in the room, and they talk about it, and the regulator goes away and then they all disappear again. And I'm going, seriously, what a waste. I've gone to projects where they've spent millions of dollars mapping out processes. They implement this new system and then all the processes are never touched ever again. I'm going, seriously, what are you doing?
So that's pretty common, right?
It's a common thing.
It's not, certainly over the last 10 years, you would imagine when you walk into an organization, it's going to be similar to that kind of environment. Do you think then this is becoming, this way of thinking, it's going to become even more important over the next 3 to 5 years? Do you think it's almost like a survival thing if you don't think this way?
Well, I think with the technology age that we're in, with the adaptability you have to demonstrate, the amount of how fast change is occurring. If you don't understand the underlying organization and how it works and how it flows, then you're in danger of making the wrong decision, making the wrong prioritization, and breaking something more often. Now, things I always say is, you know when things are going wrong when you're spending a significant amount of money on remediation. And
it's definitely going wrong then.
And your complaints are going up, wherever it may be. So I think organizations need to be, quite honest with themselves and saying, okay, one of my mottos is, for things to change, first you must change. If you're going to keep on doing things the way you've always been doing it,
You'll get the
but
same
with a
outcome,
new tool, you get the same outcome, right?
Yes.
So you got to go, okay, how do I shift this? Now, it's not you can't automatically just go with it, because the underlying way the organization works can't just change within a couple of days or weeks or months or even sometimes years. But the mindset and the behavior and the language can start changing from day one. And once you start doing that and you start talking end to end and you start challenging people, okay, if you're making this change, have you understood the upstream impacts, the downstream impacts? Is this moving you towards the targets and the metrics where you really want to go? And can you clearly evidence and demonstrate that? They're basic questions that force a lot of people to think differently immediately.
So, if you had a room full of COOs here, some of our listeners, what would you say, what would your advice be? What would be the first three things you need to do, or what would you think would be where to start?
Wow, what a question. Where do you start? Well, I'll give you a consultancy answer. It depends.
Okay.
Depends, because if they have a major problem somewhere, and typically if you're COO, you'd be aware of what the problem is. You go, okay, how do I fix this with an enterprise-wide thinking? Right? Because you've got to get some wins on the board as well to demonstrate that actually different way of thinking is important. If it's something where the organization's working really well and people go, why change? Why do something different? You're going, well, because we have to adapt. We have to think and we have to utilize the technology better going forward. So let's understand what those core processes are. So let's be preventative versus reactive. So it depends. But the most important part is customer need to customer outcome. Do I truly understand what that is? Can I draw it out? More importantly, if I had the people in the same organization and I asked all 10 of them to
would
draw
they know
it
it
out,
as well?
will they know it, and will they draw it the same way?
Yes.
More than likely they won't.
Almost guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
Almost guaranteed. So you said something earlier on, which was quite interesting, is that,
What, just the one thing interesting?
well, actually, there was one thing that stuck in my mind. One was the idea of automation, right? So the reason it sticks in my mind is because that's where so much focus is in the past, but also in the future, right? That's what AI is, in theory, coming in to do, is to automate more things. But you mentioned something earlier on, which is sometimes automating is not the right thing to do. And, so talk us through that a little bit more. What's kind of examples of where you've seen that? Because the obvious space is, let's just automate the stuff that, is the easy things to automate. And it's not automating the things that are perhaps taking the most effort or the biggest pain in your process. Do you find that when you're in an organization, that's the way people think? Yeah,
people say, okay, you just need to automate everything. I'm going, okay, fine. Thank you for that advice. It's like telling me, how do you make things more effective? Well, why don't you ask people to do overtime? Oh, wow, I hadn't thought that one before. So automate everything, or straight through processing was another term that was around. Right. And the other one is now, how are you using AI? So they're
Gen AI and all that stuff.
So they're throwaway words that typical people will question or ask. And I think the right answer is okay, but where do you think we need to automate, and why, more importantly, do we need to automate that? What impact is that actually having, and how does that move us towards our metrics? And again, the metrics has got to be customer experience, staff experience, risk and controls, revenue, cost, right? So if you don't understand what your current metrics are in that environment and what your target metrics are, then I always challenge you, well, why do you know this change is the right thing to do, and why is that the priority? And there's too many times when you go into a process, and you use tools like process mining or task mining, or you go out, you do your Six Sigma, or you walk the process, which the Gemba walk, go look and see, the most important one for me that you actually do. You can see there's spots and bits and pieces for opportunities, but the challenge is you can probably see something in the capital O operations where they're doing loads of manual work.
Yeah.
And a lot of it might be checking work or putting a control in place.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, we're going to automate that and we're going to save some FTE. But if you looked further upstream, you'll probably find that the same checks and controls are in multiple places.
So you're doing it multiple times.
So, I'm a big believer is less controls the better, right? Mm-hmm. It's like faster you go in a Formula One car because you've got really good brakes. Mm-hmm. I always go further upstream and say, okay, what's causing that maker and checking to be done?
Yes.
And how do you automate that so that whoever is putting the data in is doing it with completeness and the highest quality? Because once you guarantee that, once you guarantee that, then you don't need multiple checks all the way through. So, it's understanding what's really going on, where it's going on, and where you can make your impact. And then you go, okay, now we see that. Then you can manually do the process and saying, is that the right flow? Can we deviate the right place? Is the variances minimized? Now that's a most efficient way of doing it. Now we understand the best practice. Then let's automate that as much as we can. It's a bit like outsourcing. People say, are you a big believer in outsourcing? I say, look, it depends what the requirements are. If it's non-strategic, it's a skill or capability I don't need, it's something I'm going to replace in the future, or if they can clearly demonstrate to me that they are way better than my best practice and at a way lower cost than my best practice, which basically tells everyone, unless I'm a master in it, there's no way we should be outsourcing it, because outsourcing a problem is you're just creating a bigger one.
It's really interesting because I was talking to an insurance company down in South Africa, and they were talking about their, end-to-end process, and they were exploring this idea that, the lady that I was talking to said, we need to understand where I need to put more people in, because I want to make sure I've got that customer experience at the right touch point and which areas to automate, which was really refreshing because, you normally walk into conversations where there's already a train of thought, which is we're going to automate to remove people is the starting point for a lot of organizations. And I think we'll come full circle. We will end up with people in the point which really makes a difference with the connection with the brand, right?
Yeah.
And the service you're trying to bring.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, that's what you're describing here.
Yeah, it is. You've got to figure out where the best use of your resources to give the best customer experience. Yeah. And some customer experiences, they want something really fast and really quick, and they want it self-service.
Yes.
And you go, well, I need to provide you with that service to make it as easy as possible for you to do that, because then you're satisfied. Yes. And we're doing it the quickest, fastest, and most cost-effective way. And there's other services where they have exceptions, they have problems, they want guidance, or it's very sensitive, and they need to speak to an expert. And we need to identify who the expert is as quick as we can, because that really then also helps not only the customer, but loads of handoffs that may happen in an organization. So giving guidance is the most important thing we as an organization should do. I think that's where AI really comes to the fore.
Yes.
Where, I have this view that most people forget what to do, forget how to do it, and then spend too long trying to figure out and where to get guidance and how to do it, and they give up. And that's why you get so many errors in a process, and it's because people are just shortcutting. AI is brilliant. If you layer that over your knowledge management systems, not only does it identify where the conflicts are, but also it gives you a conversational piece to say, okay, I've got a customer here who wants to do the following. What do I do? Yes. He comes back with a nice conversation. Here's the 5 steps you need to do. Here's the references to the detailed procedures if you need them. And, my personal view, again, based on evidence where this has been rolled out, is you'll see complaints reduce, you'll see errors reduce, you'll see non-lending losses reduce if you're in a banking industry. You'll see staff engagement go up because actually their job has got to be easier.
Yeah, of course.
And also they can actually deal with more customers because they're not searching around what to do and how to do it, or they're not doing loads of handoffs. They'll figure out how to do it right, as long as their knowledge management data is up to date as well. But again, AI can help you do that.
So, I guess there's no podcast that you'll go on that doesn't ask you the AI question, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose when you're talking to a board, they're also asking you about how you're going to be deploying AI. And I know AI is broad, right? Machine learning's been around for years and has been in organizations for many, many years.
Yeah.
But the more newer Gen AI, agentic stuff is where people are seeing as that silver bullet to change. When you're in those types of conversations at that C-level, how do you kind of frame it? How do you advise or frame the usage of AI for the organization?
Yeah, so one is working with really good partners, because AI is used in multiple different environments. And if we profess to be the experts or want to be the expert in AI, then we're in the wrong business, right? There are experts already out there. And so I think partnering with the right people, whether it's in, scams and fraud, whether it's in credit decisioning type of solutions or document management solutions or knowledge management solutions. So identifying who they are, but where they are thinking, what their strategy is, where they're going forward. Workforce management, as you know, is another critical one with AI as well, right? Where it can make a significant impact. So first of all, figure out who you want to work with and how you want to work with them. And second of all, internally, giving people, it's a bit like we had with robotics before in RPA. So where do we think we can automate? Where do we think we can improve? The people who are really interested in AI are already using AI, and they already can see how that could improve the role they're doing. So to me, it's just another tool in the armory when you're doing a PDCA, plan, do, check, and act, or whether you're doing the 5 whys, or whether you're doing the fishbone, and whether you're doing normal continuous improvement. Asking that question, so have you seen anything that we could do to utilize AI? How do we experiment with that? Importantly, though, you need some governance around it. It has to be some standards, some governance. You don't want another challenge where we have hundreds, if not thousands, of end-user computing solutions out there everywhere, causing big problems, because that's just not only a governance and risk issue from a technology perspective, but a regulatory issue as well.
Completely. And I guess with your technology hat on, in your experience, so that must be things that kind of nightmares, right? Or there's stuff going all over the place.
Oh yeah, look, I have had my nightmares of people writing macros and it doing the wrong thing, and then causing significant problems in an organization. So yeah, I love technology. I think it does amazing things. I still play with technology and try things out. But yeah, in an organization, governance and compliance is critical.
So kind of wrapping up, Dan, I think it's been a fascinating conversation around the thinking of it and the end-to-end and the way you've described it. And thinking about everybody's in operations, really, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Fundamentally. Whether they know it or not, they are doing it. If you had a crystal ball, what would you think a bank of the future is going to look like? What in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years?
Well, maybe it goes back to the point you were saying before. Would you change the name of operations?
Yes.
I think fundamentally there is no such thing as a front office and back office. It is one.
Yes, completely.
And I think the technology that we're seeing now allows us to do this as well. So from a financial institution's point of view, I think we'll get rid of those terms. In fact, we need to get rid of those terms because it is one end-to-end flow, and we'll manage it that way as one combined environment. And maybe we set ourselves up as different units, and Agile tried to do this, bringing people together. It never really got outside of technology, really. But I think there is a new model out there that allows us to really understand flow and work together as a flow. So when you're designing a new organization or a new structure, my advice to you would be, don't think about the way you've been working in the past. Think about what the data, the flow, the technology can do for you in the future, and organize your company that way instead.
And I guess in some ways the new fintech organizations are already thinking that way. So the more traditional players have to evolve, otherwise potentially they won't exist in 10 years' time.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm involved in a few fintechs out there and have been in the past. And it's amazing really when you're small and starting up, you start thinking that way, and then you start putting a structure in. And then you're going, oh, why are we going back to that old structure again? How do we keep this new fluid part? So, I profess I haven't broken it yet. But when I do, I don't know what I'll call it. It won't be Agile, obviously. I'll call it something else.
Yeah.
We'll have to come up with a new term.
Well, I guess there's a lot that needs to be changed, including the regulator, how the regulator thinks about this as well. Because part of the structure that comes in is because of the regulation that forces you down that path.
Yeah, it does.
There's a number of things that will have to evolve.
There's a lot of things, but the first and fundamental thing that we can change right now, because I'm a big believer in mindfulness, is the mindset and behavior and the language. Start changing that now. and everything else will flow afterwards.
Well, I think that's a great way to end the podcast. That's a great piece of advice. So Dan, thank you very much for joining us on the Ops Game Changer.
Great, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Now, if you're interested to find out more, you can download Dan's paper, Operations with a Little O, The Next Frontier in Performance. The link is going to be in the description for this episode. And thank you very much, listeners, for joining us. And please do check in to catch more episodes of Ops Game Changers to hear more fascinating insights from other leaders in the fields of operations about how they've overcome challenges to drive performance at their enterprises. So bye for now.
Today's Ops Game Changers podcast was brought to you by ActiveOps. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can do that by sharing them on our Facebook, LinkedIn, or X feeds, or you can comment in the comments section of the YouTube version of this podcast. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do like and subscribe. And check back soon to hear more valuable insights from other inspiring leaders in operations. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye.